Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to this very special event today. We are jumpstarting a very important agenda. We are tapping the power of inclusive design, and this is the launching event of a bootcamp that we are organizing with the Global Disability Innovation Hub, with the Urban Sector Development Group at the Asian Development Bank and the Social Development Group at the Asian Development Bank. Many people have been involved in this training, and this training is very special because it's not just a theoretical training. It's actually a training which will put inclusive design into action. And if I may cite Victor Pineda, one of our special guests today, inclusive design will help to accelerate achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. It will transform cities. It's at the center of creating new cities which actually reflect the value of the Sustainable Development Goals and what we want to see. So at the center of everything, what we do should be inclusive design. It's also at the center of the quality infrastructure agenda that we lead. And having this training actually also reflects the great transformations that we are going through at the Asian Development Bank, the transformations to have integrated approaches, to be fully inclusive, and to make sure that all our projects and our partnerships benefit from these efforts. So inclusivity in everything we do. We are very happy to have this event today. We have special speakers, but to start, I would like to invite now our Vice President, Bambang Sutatano, to kick us off with his welcome remarks.
Thank you, Suzanne. A very good afternoon, evening, or morning to our distinguished speakers, ADB colleagues, and guests. Welcome to Jumpstarting Strategy 2030, tapping the power of inclusive design. To start with, what do we mean by Jumpstarting Strategy 2030, and why is inclusive design important? Today's kickoff and the Inclusive Design Bootcamp are meant to be catalytic. They are designed to jumpstart integrating inclusive design into ADB projects within the context of our Corporate Strategy 2030. For those unfamiliar with ADB New Long-Term Strategy 2030, it defines in some detail what ADB will do to respond effectively to the region's challenging and changing needs. It expands on ADB vision to help create a prosperous, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable Asia and Pacific region, all the while continuing its work to eradicate extreme poverty. The strategy's 7 operational priorities cover 1, poverty and inequality, 2, gender equality, 3, climate change, climate and disaster resilience, and environmental sustainability, 4, making cities more livable, 5, promoting rural development and food security, 6, strengthening governance and institutions, and 7, fostering regional cooperation and integrations. Overall, the strategy stresses the importance of working across sectors and silos to tackle complex development issues. And at its heart, it focuses on people and inclusions. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, despite the region's enormous economic growth and development over the past decades, many remain poor and vulnerable. The pandemic left many more exposed. In fact, our estimates show we may have added 78 million people to the ranks of those considered extreme poor in 2020. Our region is also home to about 70% of the global population of persons with disability, or some 690 million people. And by 2050, 1 in 4, or about 1.3 billion people, will be over 60 years old. This demographic shift will be accompanied by a large increase in the number of people living with disabilities. People with disabilities are among the poorest in Asia. They lack access to social services, employment, and livelihood opportunities, and continue to face barriers in accessing infrastructure, whether for transport, communications, or information and assistive technology. To help meet our Strategy 2030 goals, we are committed to meet, as best possible, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, as well as more specific guidelines, such as the G20's Quality Infrastructure Principles. These principles are designed to ensure infrastructure is inclusive, help reduce inequalities and disparities, and boost and sustain economic growth with social equity. The Global Infrastructure Hub, which supports the G20 in driving this ambitious agenda, defines inclusive infrastructure as, and I quote, any infrastructure development that enhances positive outcomes in social inclusivity and ensures no individual, community, or social group is left behind or prevented from benefiting from improved infrastructure. Critical to this is the process of inclusive design, one that works with and empowers stakeholders. So colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, inclusive design helps everyone experience the world around them in a fair and equal way. It encompasses the widest possible range of people, regardless of age, ability, or circumstance, and places them at the heart of the design process. This includes people with disability, women, children, youth, and older people. It covers those from diverse social groups, income levels, and cultures, and other traditionally bypassed or less considered in the design process. Inclusive design is not an add-on, overlay, or special provision. It allows projects to harness the power of good design to ensure results have impact and are sustainable for everyone. One of ADB commitments at the 2018 Global Disability Summit was to create a strategic roadmap for strengthening disability inclusive development. It defines what ADB can do across operations and in our knowledge work. Inclusive design is an important part of the way forward. To help ensure inclusion remains a driving force in our work, our Social Development Thematic Group and Urban Sector Group are collaborating to build skills and approaches to integrate inclusive design into ADB operations. Our partner in this work, the Global Disability Innovation Hub, is an international center of excellence and will run our training program. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we are gathering today just one day before the 2021 Paralympics opens in Tokyo, where the eyes of the world will be on extraordinary athletes with disabilities from around the world. You will hear from our speakers today how the 2012 Paralympics in London and the UK influenced the development and application of inclusive design standards, the broad rollout, and how these games will be a catalyst for scaling up global initiatives. I'm delighted ADB will participate in that global effort. I'm honored to open today's sessions and welcome our distinguished guests, all global leaders on inclusions and inclusive design. And today we stimulate thinking, share ideas, and together we build tangible ways to ensure everyone benefits from development. Our bootcamp participants will be the new ADB champions charged with embedding these ideas in their work with our developing members. I hope you all actively participate in taking this agenda forward and help jumpstart our work on Strategy 2030. Thank you very much and have a good discussion. Back to you, Susan.
Thank you very much, VP. You provided a wonderful context of why we are here and what we are doing. And I want to cite a famous German scientist, Einstein, who said, there is only one way to influence others, and this is by example. And that's what we want to do, set examples here, how to do inclusive design and how to do this to transform the way we think about development. I think it's very important also when we think about the new normal, because what we realize is what is normal for some is not normal for others. So we really have to create inclusive normals for everyone. So this event today is absolutely timely in so many aspects. And I want to say a few words about how we will run this. So we will first hear from our inspirational leaders about why we are doing this work, how this works. We'll hear from Vicky Austin, the CEO of the Global Disability Innovation Hub. We'll then hear from Chris Holmes, who set these examples on how we can actually implement inclusive designs and how the Paralympics in London became a transformational event for so many aspects of urban development. And then we'll hear from Victor how inclusivity and thinking about inclusive design is really transformational, not just for everybody here and for disabled people, but actually for the way we look at development. So it will be a great inspirational course. And then we have a discussion with Manoj, the chief of the Urban Sector Development Group, and with Wendy and the panelists to discuss what does it mean in practice? Because I think what is so unique about this training is that we will actually not only talk about the standards and the laws and what needs to be changed, but how we actually strengthen institutions like ourselves at the Asian Development Bank to support effective implementation. And then these are these examples which influence hopefully many more to work in this way. So I'd like to mention that we have live captioning for everybody. So there are subtitles. It makes it easier to follow this event. This event will be recorded and you can watch it later on. Let's now start with our inspirational speakers. Oh, sorry, before we do that, let's take a photo. So if everyone can please open the cameras and we can take a quick photo. So, okay. You let me know when you're done with the photo. It's a lot faster virtually than when we had to assemble in person. Okay, are we done?
I think we're good, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Of course, also one more point for everyone who is participating from outside, please share your thoughts, your reflections on our social media channels, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and make sure we have as much visibility as possible on this event. So now let's please turn to Vicky Austin. Vicky, we've met a couple of years back in China. I was very impressed with your work, your enthusiasm, your dedication. You are the co-founder and the CEO of the Global Disability Innovation Hub. You're doing interesting work from advocacy to working with startups and technology. You're creating ecosystems and businesses around inclusivity. So maybe you can share with us a bit more about the Global Disability Hub, about this training, and why you think there is a unique moment now to have this global impact with the work you're doing. So over to you, Vicky.
Thanks so much, Susan, and it's lovely to see you again. 9 years ago this week, my co-founder Ian McKinnon and I were sitting on the Olympic Park in East London, making final preparations for the London 2012 Paralympic Games to start. The Olympics had ended and the country was littered with billboards saying, thanks for the warm-up, thanks to Channel 4. And we knew something had changed. We were about to host the most successful Paralympic Games ever. Now, 5 years ago this week, our third co-founder, Professor Kathy Holloway, and I were poised ready again, this time to launch the Global Disability Innovation Hub in Rio, to set up our company, which was established to drive disability innovation for a fairer world. Since then, we've reached 21 million people through our £50 million programme, working with over 70 partners in 37 countries. This time last year, roughly when the Tokyo Paralympics was supposed to be happening, GDI Hub started talking seriously about working with the Asian Development Bank. Now, I'm Vicky Austin. I'm the CEO of the Global Disability Innovation Hub, and we are a social business and a research centre based at UCL. And today I'm joined by my amazing team, and I'm delighted that includes Shivani Gupta, who will be leading this important programme of training with Ian McKinnon, who is the lead for Inclusive Design for GDI Hub. And GDI Hub was recently awarded Global Collaborating Centre status from the World Health Organization. And we're the only one in the world right now that works on assistive technology, but we're good with firsts. The first time accessibility was put at the heart of the Olympic Games. The first time the Paralympic Games delivered a legacy on disability. The first master's programme on disability innovation delivered out of UCL. The first to lead a global programme on assistive technology with access for the 900 million people that need AT but don't have it around the world. And so it's my absolute delight to be sharing with you today our first inclusive design program for an MDB designed to improve the lives of millions by supporting your teams with practical, easy to embed and good design for disabled people, for all people, and for your bottom line. I have to say, this is one of the most considered, ambitious and bold programs I've seen any major organisation undertake to really address disability inclusion. So let me take a moment to welcome all 248 of you on the disability innovation journey. You've joined. You're already part of the movement. So thank you on behalf of 1.2 billion people. This time next year, we'll be looking back at the work we've done together, at the results we've had and the people we've impacted. So we're here to talk about inclusive design of the built environment. Some people call it universal design, but we call it inclusive because that's what we want our spaces and places to be. Today, I'm going to convince you, I hope, of 5 things. The first is that disability is not a minority concern. Over 1 billion people in our world are persons with disabilities, and actually it's more like 1.2, 60% of those live in Asia. We need to get this right. And as I talk to you today, my colleagues in Tokyo are ready to launch the 3rd biggest event in the world, Paralympics, and also a massive global campaign called We the 15, which is aimed at pointing out that 1 in 7 of us live with impairments. Some are easy to see. You might immediately recognize a wheelchair user as a person with a disability, but other impairments are harder to spot, like mine. Living with 2 mental health conditions can be tricky at times, but I bet I'm not the only one out of 250 people on this call that has to do it. As a Paralympian said to me recently, disability is not a minority concern. It's everyone's family now, and it will affect all of us eventually if we're lucky enough to live that long. And we know our people are aging, so our cities that we built, the transport links, the water access points, the sanitation facilities, the education and employment sites, they need to be fit for purpose, fit for our grandmothers, for our disabled children, and for ourselves. Second point, inclusive design isn't just for persons with disabilities, it's for everyone. If you ask Microsoft, they talk about temporary disabilities, and they mean someone carrying a child or bags or coffee. They know that a text message was invented for deaf people, and they know that good, accessible tech is better for everyone, and therefore people buy more of it. We're working in 6 cities around the world right now to test our inclusive design approach, 3 of them in Asia, and the principles we set for London. And our first principle is that inclusive design needs to work for everyone. It's not about designing ugly places for special groups of people. It's about brilliant design that embeds inclusion too. Point 3, designing inclusively from the outset is 1,000 times cheaper than retrofitting accessibility, according to research. So if you believe me that inclusive design is important, the only way to do it is from the start. And actually, while we're on research, point 4, community leadership is the thing. Tomorrow, we'll publish some work we've done mapping the disability inclusion approach of London 2012. And you might be forgiven for thinking that the mission was set in the bid for London 2012, deliver the best and most accessible games ever. And it was, but actually the leadership and the ideas came from the community, from disabled people's organizations and amazing disabled leaders who infiltrated the organizations delivering the games and ensured that our games was the most inclusive ever. And with making new cities, products, processes, or infrastructures, users know best. And finally, my 5th point, disability innovation is what techies call a wicked problem. That means it's a big challenge. That means it can be solved in multiple ways with lots of different variables at play. Basically, it's techie heaven. So I put it to you that it's worth getting the best brains in a room to tackle, and if we can solve for, disability inclusion, so we can lead the way on this global challenge and, by the way, build better places for everyone. Now is the time. There's a global movement brewing. Tomorrow, iconic buildings will light up around the world for We the 15, starting in Tokyo. And this will launch a global decade for change. When you look back, each and every one of 253 of you, in 10 years' time, what do you want to tell your children that you did to support 1 billion people living with dignity and justice? Every big issue needs entrepreneurs, but it also needs intrapreneurs too. Creative folks inside big organizations hustling for change. I think I've met a few of you already in ADB, and I can't wait to meet more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. I really like that you said it's one of the boldest program you have seen. So I think this is very much in line with this kind of new thinking of what what knowledge can do, how you can set bold missions and align many people behind it, and then actually drive this change, right? Because inclusive design is actually about change management, changing the way people see the world with different eyes, different perspectives, and then embracing that to deliver something that is a lot better for everyone. So Vicky, with you giving us this context, now we are very excited to hear from Lord Chris Holmes. He is a very well-known person, I may say, especially in the sports field. I think you won the most medals as Paralympics. I think I read this last night. And not only are you an amazing athlete, but you're also an advocate and spokesperson. You are part of the influential House of Lords Select Committee on Science and Technology. You're part of the British Parliamentary Group. So many different roles. But I think your biggest accomplishment was to show at the Paralympics in London how this design for an event can change approaches to urban development. So if you can share with us a little bit more about your story, about the work you've done with the Paralympics, how you created a truly inclusive event, and what you want to do next. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much indeed. Maganda Hapon, konnichiwa, ni hao, and a very good morning from London. I'm Chris Holmes, member of the House of Lords with responsibility for new technologies, AI, DLT, and most importantly, inclusion and diversity. Some time ago, I was the director for the London 2012 Paralympic Games. And before that, before most of you on this call were probably born, I swam around the world on the Great Britain swimming team. Most pertinent this morning, my first Paralympic Games was in Seoul in 1988. It's a great pleasure to be with you all today for this launch of such a tremendous, inspirational, exciting initiative, not least as we have the Tokyo Games on the eve of beginning and setting new standards in Paralympic sporting performance. Today, I'll set out a few of the lessons, the learnings, the thoughts from London 2012 to set you on your way for the training that you will undertake during Tokyo. What I wanted to do with London 2012, I knew we had an extraordinary opportunity. I believed we could put on the most successful Paralympic Games ever. For the first time, sell all the tickets, have all Olympic sponsors, also Paralympic sponsors, and drive mega broadcast deals right around the world. None of that had ever been done before for a Paralympic Games. But underpinning it all, most importantly, to have the most accessible, the most inclusive Paralympic and yes, Olympic Games ever staged. I knew that the way to make good games, great games, was to have access, diversity, and inclusion right at the heart of every single decision and every single individual's experience right from the beginning of the bid process. To take just 3 examples from London 2012 to illustrate this: the airport, the Paralympic Park, and the city. The airport, the place most people first experience a new city. London Heathrow, certainly not the most accessible place on planet Earth when we began our process. 94 airlines, hundreds of ground handling companies never had worked together before, quite the contrary. We built Team Heathrow, one team for London 2012 to deliver for all of our athletes, all of our guests when they arrived in London. Before London, if you were a wheelchair user, you would have the ignominy of being pushed off a plane by an airport member of staff through the terminal to collect your bags. Imagine that if we'd had the world's greatest Paralympic athletes pushed through the terminal. That would have been their first experience of London 2012, hardly inclusive. So one small thing we did to make a mega difference, to enable athletes' wheelchairs to be repatriated to them at the aircraft door, so they could independently and inclusively access and move through the terminal. One small difference that made a massive difference. We looked at principles where that experience was what would drive all of the operational detail and indeed all of the inclusive infrastructure. It's the experiential which should always drive the operational and the inclusive infrastructure. So to the park, we wanted to make the most inclusive piece of real estate on planet Earth. Examples: one night at the track, we stored 1,700 strollers. Imagine that. Access, diversity and inclusion, not just for disabled people, but for all people, enabling that inclusive experience. We'd sold all the tickets, 80,000 spectators at heats, 80,000 spectators at finals every day of the games. But that's not just 80,000, that's 80,000 of the most diverse crowd ever gathered together to come, spectate and celebrate what the Paralympic Games was, is, and indeed what the Paralympic Games could be. Journalists would say to me, show me the inclusive features. I'd say to them, that's the point. They don't stand out like a sore thumb. They're integrated from the outset, hence inclusive, hence a feel of flow and dynamism and experience right through every element of the park. And here's the great thing: plan it, envisage it, imagine inclusion from the outset, and all too often it doesn't cost a penny piece more. Have to retrofit and it costs more and it looks less. So to the city, what could we do? We only had 7 years of planning. We had a Victorian city, an Elizabethan city, a Roman city. We couldn't possibly make that inclusive right across the piece in that time. But two things we could do to ensure that every experience could be made accessible and inclusive. A shopping experience in the West End, a theatre experience, a heritage experience, an experience of the river, being able to walk from Tower Bridge and the Tower of London all the way down the South Bank opposite Parliament. Everything in that journey, the physical infrastructure, the businesses, the people part of it, everything inclusive. And yes, you could do it. Cobbles are on the floor, completely inaccessible. Take the cobbles up, relay them, enable them to be accessible. And not only have you made an inclusive environment, but you haven't had to have any adverse impact on the aesthetics. Aesthetics and accessibility, hand in hand, rather than diametrically opposed. From the games, carrying forward into everything that I've done since. Now, as a result of our action, all Premier League football grounds accessible for disabled people would have been unthinkable a decade ago. All transport inclusive across London, audio, visual and description on all buses, all London taxis completely accessible, more tube stations accessible, more rail stations. None of this would have happened had we not won the right to host the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games in 2012. In conclusion, it's not about physical features. It's not about barrier-free. Inclusive infrastructure is the bedrock on what we build anything which can be considered civilized. It's the absolute bedrock of civilization. It's as good a hallmark of humanity as anything. Inclusive spaces, inclusive places where people come, where people connect, where people create, where talent and individual aspiration can be enabled, empowered, and realized. So excited to be part of this kickstart, this excellent program, which will be rolled out as the Tokyo Paralympic Games inspires the world. Transformational, certainly. Groundbreaking. More than that, inclusive ground making. To all of the ADB executives of today, for the inclusive Asian cities of tomorrow, I wish you every success. And I'm absolutely delighted to play my part in whatever way I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. Very convincing statements, and listening to you, one wonder why are we not doing it anyway, right? Why are we not doing it from the beginning in everything we do? Why do we need to bring so much attention to the issue, which shows us how much work needs to be done in this world to make it inclusive for everybody and everyone. Each of us here working in development, working in governments, has their contributions to make. This is why we are here. So I think you made this very clear. You give the purpose for the work we are doing in ADB and with the Global Disability Innovation Hub. So thank you, Chris. So now we would love to hear from Victor Pineda. He is an innovation, how do we call it? An innovation urbanist. Maybe that's the right word. A technology expert, a transformational leader. You work at universities, but also with governments. And I think what we'd like to hear from you is, how do we mainstream this kind of thinking really? And how do we make sure people see the value beyond just create inclusive design, but really transforming the way we live, transforming the way we think, and transforming transforming the reason why we actually wanted to development, right? To make sure everyone has the best possibilities to contribute to this world that we live in. So, Victor, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Susan. And let me recognize the leadership of the ADB, and I agree with Vicky that Vice President Bang, and the other colleagues that the ADB have taken on a very progressive, future-oriented project that is not only about, part of the larger transformation, but it's about really putting our values into practice. I also want to thank our longtime partners, Vicky and Ian and everybody at Global Disability Innovation Hub, who with us has engaged in a 10-year global compact and campaign for inclusive and accessible cities. Now, to answer your question directly, I think we can really build off of what we heard previously. And that's that too many limiting beliefs and perceptions currently exist within institutions of all sizes. And that is that there are bigger problems to solve. That, perhaps this organization might already be doing some of this work, but it's not a major priority right now. Perhaps we should take this on later. Some other organizations might think that it's too hard, too complicated, or too expensive. Other people might think we're making progress on access and inclusion, we have programs in place. But the reality is that the status quo is really not working, and the change and the rate of change in areas is increasingly making this issue of inclusive design one of the primary issues for our work. Now, I like to start off my speeches and my interventions with a very simple idea. The future is accessible, and the future is also radically diverse, and the future is within reach. My background is as an urban planner. I helped negotiate the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities between 2002 and 2007. We really put together a framework that now has been adopted by over 180 countries around the world. Later, my organization, World Enabled, worked to help draft targets on SDG 11 for the Sustainable Development Goals. And then even further after that, thinking a lot more about the New Urban Agenda and looking at how we can empower local leaders in a network of mayors to really have not only capacity building, but capacity recognition of the capacity that this network of leaders has. World Enabled and a lot of our partners are really working together to drive and deliver inclusive infrastructure in cities through advocacy events, through research and data development, and through technical assistance and training programs. We're really excited that we've had a major commitment by global networks of cities like United Cities and local governments to create a mayoral network of cities committed to the principles of inclusive and accessible urban development. And the foundational part of that is inclusive design, not only in the built environment, but in technology and policies and procedures, and how the values of inclusive design can really create more accountable, more responsive, more sustainable, and more impactful programs, policies, and services. So I want to leave you with some quick takeaways as you advance on your training. Whether you're working with Wendy on the social sector, Wendy Walker, or Manoj Sharma on the urban issues and making cities more livable, and they've done really phenomenal work, and I want to commend them for that. Or whether you're another part of the ADB or outside the ADB, there's really 5 very simple things you should think about when benchmarking a development policy or a development program or an infrastructure project. And that is really, what do the laws say in the local context vis-a-vis accessibility? And that's also aligned to international standards. Number 2, what is some of the rhetoric around access and inclusion? Is the executive, like the mayor or a governor or a president, really committed to these issues? And are their budgets being allocated? That's leadership. Number 3, institutional capacity, which really is about KPIs and managing this inclusive design throughout all your sectors and policies and programs. Number 4, the area of attitudes. Do there continue to be negative attitudes towards accessibility, and universal design, or just disability rights in general? Understanding where those attitudes are and the gaps will allow you to make more targeted information and awareness raising campaigns. And ultimately, to benchmark your work, you need to think about authentic and representative participation of the targeted groups you're trying to impact. Understanding what all the different stakeholders are and organizations run by people with disabilities in the areas where you're developing programs is really foundational to build their capacity and also engage in a more authentic way to the diversity of experiences and disability. Building a ramp is not enough, because the development is about the transformation of the location to unlock human agency and ultimately eliminate agency deprivations that exist, because every barrier, every obstacle
Hello, I think we have a connection issue here right now. Is everyone experiencing that?
Were you able to hear my
Ian?
delivery?
Hi,
You dropped off.
We just lost the last minute,
Yeah.
Victor.
Yeah.
Oh, the last minute? I was just saying that.
Human agency. We heard you say unlock human agency.
And I said ultimately it's that each one of us in this room today has the opportunity to leverage inclusive design as an innovative element of your toolkit to develop more responsive policies, programs that eliminate barriers and unlock human agency. The future is accessible only when we're actively identifying and eliminating those barriers. And our collective development and prosperity is only realized where we leverage inclusive design to do just that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Victor. Very clear message what you're saying. And your point on unlocking human agency. And for that, we need to really build these examples, strengthen institutions, but have this leadership from the mayors, from development organizations is what will drive this change and transformation. And I think your other point is very important, that inclusive design unlocks innovation and the way we think in new ways and create things, how we solve problem. And that's a skill that we need for any kind of development issue that we are tackling. I can see you want to say something, Victor.
Yeah, I'm very proud of the region and also of all of our colleagues at the Asian Development Bank because of the investments made on smart cities. But you can't have a smart city if it's not an accessible city. You can't have a smart city if it's not an inclusive city. So let's leverage inclusive design to ensure that we can have cities that respond to that innovation, that digital transformation, to climate change, and to human dignity.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you. I think we will have more discussions here as I'm handing over the discussion now to Wendy. Wendy is the chief of the social development group. She is the champion for many, many new things in ADB to really think differently, think in an integrated manner, and really put the people at the center of everything we do. And Wendy will talk with Manoj Sharma, who is the chief of the urban sector group. And that's really where the implementation happens. So bringing these groups together and working together is what will drive this difference. So Wendy, over to you, and I will invite all panelists, of course, or all speakers to join the conversation. I'd also like to say that you please share your questions or comments in the question and answer chat box, I think, that you can see for this event. Please engage, please share your thoughts with us as we go through this conversation now. So Wendy, I'm handing over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Susan. And thanks to all the presenters for those really excellent and inspiring examples of your work and on the importance of inclusive design. We're delighted to have you here today. And also the more than 250 people who've joined in today. So I know there are a lot of you out there, and I really hope that you ask some questions, but to take advantage of the opportunity to really speak to these presenters. In this session, as Susan said, we really want to bring it all the way down into ADB. So I'm delighted to have my colleague here, Manoj Sharma, who's the chief of the urban sector group. And Manoj, I wanted to ask you if you can tell us a